Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share a few thoughts. Uh, my special greetings to colleagues on the dais as well. I have 3 points to make, but before I make those 3 points, I want to sort of relate to some very insightful remarks that our DG Fire Services made about the fact that whatever happens is not what you had planned for. I think it's a thing which is said in disasters that the disaster that will happen is not the one you had planned for. However, and I studied urban planning, and in urban planning there is a famous axiom that uh, plan is nothing, planning is everything. So the process of planning in case of disaster risk reduction, process of planning a response is more important than what you plan actually, the actual plan you have, because the process of planning brings together different stakeholders. Uh, and when we do mock exercises, just yesterday and today we are running a mock exercise in Pondicherry. You interject surprises into it so that it's not a static thing. There are real world examples. If you look at Samyar Pettai, it's a village in Tamil Nadu in Kadalur district. When the tsunami occurred on 26 December 2004, the mortality in that village was several orders of magnitude less compared to other villages. Had they done any planning for tsunami? No, they hadn't even heard that there is something called tsunami. But they had done a drill for cyclone preparedness just a month ago. So that helped. So what I'm saying is that, as DG just said, that we have to plan, but we have to be nimble. We can't just sort of stick in one plan and say that this is the plan. So this is a process of continuous learning. As he said, the person who is on the ground, a lot depends on him or her. That person really needs to have, need to be able to think on their feet. And we have to prepare them to have the ability to think on their feet. So that is really, really important. So with that, I think that really set the stage for the kind of dynamic thinking we require at different levels, dynamic ability to adjust our response in a, a different kind of evolving disaster situation. So with that, I just want to, there's a lot that can be said on disaster risk management in the country, but I just want to focus on three things, as was highlighted also by several speakers. Dr. Mahapatra talked about it, DG also talked about it, that following the 2001 earthquake, we have a law, we have a three-tiered structure, we have a provision of national authority, state authority, and district authority. But the next frontier in disaster risk management is really localization. Even a district is too gross a level. We need capacity at the local level. And I think that's where we really have to work together and in exercising our imagination as to how we can take disaster risk management capacity down to the local level. From NDMA side, we have a very successful scheme which has created 1 lakh volunteers, Apda Mitras across the country. These 1 lakh volunteers, sometimes when disasters occur, we learn from the newspaper reports that they were amongst the first ones to respond well before the state disaster response force or national disaster response force arrived on the ground. Now, we can pat our back and say that, wow, this is great. 1 lakh volunteers, 1 lakh Abda Mitras in 2 years. But if you do the maths, that comes to 14 for 14,000 people, there is one Abda Mitra. So it's still a drop in the ocean. We really need to take it to scale. We are working with DG fire service, who's also DG of Civil Defense and Home Guard. How do we bring them into it? How do we sort of build their capacity? That's already an existing resource to really, multiply our capacity at the local level. There is a big program to strengthen fire services at the local level. 5,500 crore program, again, that the DG is leading, where we are supporting states in modernizing their fire services. Fire services are really close to the communities, so we have to have capacity there to not just do fire response, but all kinds of emergency response. The point I'm making by citing these examples is that next frontier really is local level. Every village, every town, every city, every neighborhood should have some basic capacity for disaster response. And above all, awareness and nimbleness to respond to any situation, any disasters that arise. So localization is key. A few years ago, our Prime Minister outlined a 10-point agenda for disaster risk reduction, and a key element of that was really building local capacity. The second point I want to make is that, the topic of the subtitle of this conference is Uniting Disaster Mitigation Stakeholders. I think it's really important that we focus on mitigation. We can come up with excellent capacities for response to a flood or urban flood or cyclone, but we will always be responding. The level of risk that you have, the only way to address it is to really reduce the risk, stop the creation of new risk. If today every year we add something like 3% to our building stock, 60% of the country is exposed to earthquakes. In that 60% of the area, 75% of our population lives. So actually the risk is higher. It's not 60%, it's 75% of us individuals, population of this country, is exposed to moderate to severe intensity earthquakes. And the rate of expansion of building stock, new buildings, is something like 3%. So if we say that every new building that we build will be compliant with seismic codes, we will be having a very different conversation in 2 decades from now. We will have a large portion of our buildings which will withstand an earthquake, and hence we will have less requirement of responders. If we do not invest in mitigation, then it is a little bit like, you want to go up, but you are standing on the down escalator. You will make some progress, but not quite a lot of progress, because escalator is coming down, you're trying to use that to go up. If you show a lot of heroics, you may reach the halfway, but you will never get on top. We just recently had a major earthquake in Japan. The deaths were in couple of hundreds. It was 7.5 in a highly dense urban area, because they have been working on it for the last 3 decades. After the great Kanto earthquake so they had exactly the kind of situation we have right now, which is a large proportion of vulnerable building stock. They also had the same situation. After the great Kanto earthquake, they said, no, this is not acceptable. We have to change because we are in an earthquake prone area. We talk about cyclone preparedness. We give example of 1999 cyclone, super cyclone, where 10,000 people died, in 2013 cyclone, where the deaths were in a dozen or so. Great. We should be very happy about that we had great early warning system. We evacuated people. We had cyclone shelters. But if you compare the number of houses that were damaged, they were identical. We had the same kind of recovery program. So my dream is that in 20 years or 10 years, we should say that every house in coastal parts of our country is a cyclone shelter. It's built to a standard that it can withstand. And it's entirely doable, and that's where I think you have so many technology partners here. How do we make the most of the modern technology? There is enormous progress in material science, building technologies, geospatial technologies. If we have to mitigate the problem of urban flood, we can, map the risk at a very, very granular level and invest very wisely for reducing that risk. Yesterday and day before yesterday, we had a national workshop on managing heat waves, mitigating the risk of heat wave. I saw examples where you can use AI-based tools to actually see which particular house in a slum is getting excessive heat accumulation under the roof, down to each household. You can actually go and address that house that you need to get out of here. Let's take you to a cool room, or make some provision, some cooling provision, some relief you can provide. So that is the kind of promise of technology we have. But I think we have to do a lot more to actually realize the full promise of technology. So we are one of the few countries. I wouldn't say that there are more than half a dozen countries that have a dedicated fund for disaster mitigation. We have $6 billion for 5 years. If you see FEMA's budget, if you see Canada's budget, Australia's budget, we are comparable. So for the first time, the allocation we have for disasters has 40% money for immediate response, 30% for long-term reconstruction and recovery, 20% for mitigation, and 10% for capacity development and preparedness, short-term preparedness. So we have the resources. I mean, these are the resources that we've used to do the common alerting protocol. But we really need to come together, work with the states, work with the districts in really focusing on mitigation. You see, the biggest problem with disaster risk management is that you don't get credit for a disaster that did not happen. So if you make a house earthquake resistant, an earthquake happened, no one died, you didn't deploy anybody in orange suits, it's not very attractive. It's not a news. There is no heroics. But if we have to realize the dream that our Prime Minister articulates of Viksit Bharat by 2047, disaster mitigation is not something that is nice to do. It is essential to do. It's really important that we take that message back from here, that it is not, of course, any modern nation should have very good response capacities. But if you don't mitigate the risk, if you do not make sure that all our development takes into account current risks, future risks, and makes ourselves resilient to it, we will be trying to use a down escalator to go up the building. We will never get there. And my third and final point is that future is no longer a good guide for the future. Sorry, past is no longer a good guide for the future. Every year we see, when we started working on heat waves 7-8 years ago, we used to classify 12 states as heat wave prone. Now we classify 23 of them. Geography of floods is changing. Areas of the country that did not have floods are experiencing floods. There is not a single year where we do not have a major urban area which is flooded. Fortunately, urban flood does not last very long. So it also goes off the news cycle. But the impact it has on economy, on people is enormous. We are probably underestimating the impact it has on people. So it is really important that we focus on not just looking at present risk, but looking at what is the future risk. We have to plan for the future as well as for the present. So I think institutions such as TERI have a very important role. You also work on climate, much greater understanding of local level manifestation of climate change is emerging. How do we bring that into on disaster risk reduction? So these are my 3 points. In the end, I just want to tell you a story. The story is that in a lawless part of the world, there was a man. It was salary day. He went to an ATM. He withdrew his salary. He was going home. He was intercepted by 3 gangsters with knife. They stabbed him to death, took his money, and ran away. But they were caught. And there was an autopsy. These people were brought in the court, and the judge was reading the autopsy report. The autopsy report said that the person died a natural death. So the judge summoned the doctor who had conducted the autopsy. He said that, look, what is this? A knife was found. In fact, 3 knives were found. There is clear evidence that this person was stabbed, and you have ruled that it is a natural death. He said, my lord, if somebody is stabbed 8 times, it's quite natural that they will die. So there are no natural disasters, they're all man-made.